Hello everyone. This is week 2 of painting loosely and more freely than we have been, and this week I'm going to demonstrate painting a poppy, and I'm going to allow some of the colours of the poppy to bleed into the background. So there won't be a background covering all of the paper, but just here and there to just make my picture hopefully look looser than it would if I just painted within the confines of the drawing. Red is quite a tricky paint to colour to use, and it's not my favourite, but we'll just have to see how it goes. Usually when you start putting its complementary colour beside it, which is obviously the green, the whole thing starts to look better and to sing a bit. So bear with it, let your paper and your paint dry, let everything dry before you judge it and start touching it up too much. And remember all the time that we are painting nice and loosely at the moment, and so we've got to let quite a bit of the detail go. So not too many colours. I've kept a fairly limited palette, and I'm using the cadmiums because I want to try and create a nice bright poppy, but also a nice warm picture as well. You can see my poppy here. Poppies do tend to vary quite a bit in colour and shape and what have you, but generally speaking they do just have the 4 petals, 2 smaller ones on the inside and 2 larger ones surrounding those at the edges. So as I say, I'm using the cadmiums to try and get that brightness, but this particular poppy seems to be quite orange, so and I more often than not do this when painting poppies. I pop down a little wash of a pale yellow first, and that's cad-free yellow pale, so that when I leave paper showing or light showing, it's going to be yellow rather than the white paper showing through, which could look quite stark. Right, before I start, I just want to show you this. During lockdown, I've obviously had to wash my hands and sanitize my hands all the time, and it starts to affect my hands a little bit. So I'm constantly using hand cream, which when I then come to paint, I find I'm leaving a residue sometimes on my paper, which resists the paint and I can't paint over it well. So had a look online and found these, which are called craft gloves, on eBay, and you get, they're very, very inexpensive, and these were really cheap, and I got, I think, 6 in different coloured ones in a pack, but in fact you only really need 1. But it works. It stopped that thing happening whereby I'm resisting the paint with anything that's left on my hand. So if you're having that same trouble, look on eBay. Craft gloves work a treat. Right, okay, so I don't know if you can see my drawing. I've just got 3 poppies there and a few seed heads and so on. And I've got my paint mixed up. I'm going to work wet on wet and allow my colours to blend quite a bit. Nice big brush, which is going to stop me trying to get all the detail in and fiddling. Nice juicy paint, which will mean, because there's quite a lot of water mixed in with my paint, it will mean that it will dry up quite a bit lighter, but I'm actually I might have to just let that go for the sake of getting the freedom. Not that keen on deep red anyway, so it won't be a big issue for me. But, you know, lots of tones in here, which you can just try and get. I haven't obviously marked off the stamens because, as you can see, they're much darker. I'll just leave the little centre free of paint and not worry about masking anything off for the stamens. I can paint a dark colour over the top. But I'm working in the direction that I see the markings in that flower, so that I'll get those shapes appearing a little bit and maybe some light as well. If you want to have another try at painting without drawing, which I really would quite like to have done, but I thought I'd, you know, just give you the opportunity of seeing a drawing and painting, you know, drawing first this week, because you may have decided that that's what you prefer to do. But again, if you prefer to just paint without drawing, again, please do. So I'm actually just now, while it's still damp, dropping in a little bit of alizarin on these top petals. So that I'm getting a little bit of depth in these top petals, and then maybe when they're a little bit drier I can put the softer petals in behind and the larger petals and keep them a little bit softer. There's a big floppy petal here. So keep an eye on your subject all the time, and if you found that your poppy has started to flop and close up on you, or petals dropping off, it might be a good idea just to photograph it first. But I will write this down, but a big tip when painting poppies is after you've picked them, and we've done this lots of times in the studio and it does work, after you've picked them, plunge the bottom of the stalks into boiling water. Sounds very unkind, but they do seem to like it. It perks them up. But after they've been in the hot water, the boiling water, for 10 seconds, plunge them straight away into some cold water. Then they'll stay up. They should then stay up for you. Mine have stayed up in front of me now since I got them in earlier and did the drawing. So, and probably they'll stay even longer. Depends, I think, on the poppy and how well you treat them, but that's a really good tip. If you don't do that, they really will. This is alizarin going on here. They really will close up on you, and you'll not see the shapes anymore. So get those shapes drawn, I think, this time, or painted quickly if you're painting without drawing. There'll be some on Pixabay if you can't find any. Right. Now, I think I need to go just a little bit deeper in here while that's still damp. And I think all I'm going to do for my shadows this time is to stick with this alizarin. I don't think I'm going to put anything else on. I'll probably change my mind and start putting some purple in or something. But I don't want to take the brightness away, which if I start putting purple in, it might dull it a little bit. So I'm going to see if I can get away with just making my shadow colours nice and dark with the alizarin this time. Might go in again when that's dry. Right, so I'll now try to put this little back petal in here. So hold your brush nice and loosely and away from the point. It's going to help you to get this nice and loose. And don't necessarily follow your drawing explicitly. Now you do have a rather sort of frilly jagged edge to deal with. So I'll keep this back petal, I think, a little bit lighter, so that my little petals that are in the front will stand forward. And not forgetting I've got to put I've got 3 jars of water there just in case today. I've got to put the little stamens in afterwards. Right, this comes into a little curl here. So while I'm painting quite freely, I'm still being careful. Painting loosely doesn't necessarily mean quickly and carelessly. You've still got to be careful. You've still got to get some good shapes happening. And if you're working wet on wet, you will have the control because the paint won't go past the water edge. So you'll certainly have as much control as you need, I would think. And then this petal comes right round here. So you can let areas dry if you feel you need to before painting next to them, but I'm not going to do that too much. I'm going to just not mind if my colours blend or just leave little spaces. Right, so that's looking not too bad. I won't go back in at the moment. I'll probably go back in a little while and see where I want to start to let the colours go. I'll just paint this one and then a couple of buds or something, and then I may just have to stop and do a bit more before putting in the centres and things, so that you can again see the finished painting today. Such popular pictures with people, poppies do seem to be. All of my painting life I've been asked to paint poppies. I know Norfolk is poppy land, but nevertheless they are a very, very popular flower. People like them in paintings, in cards, anything, because they're lovely and bright, I guess, and cheerful. But that hasn't been great for me, to be honest, because they're not my favourite flower to paint. Right, so there'll be, I might just go for a little bit of purple into my alizarin here, because there's going to be quite a bit of shadow under here, which I'm popping in while it's wet. You can either let it dry and paint on afterwards, but because I'm painting largely wet on wet, I thought I'd just pop that in there now. And that will help that one to stand forward. You can now see how it's drying up so much lighter, and where I may have to go back and bring that colour up. I'll see. But we don't always have to paint exactly what we see, and if we like what we've done and we like the colour as it is, but it isn't exactly what you're seeing in front of you, it doesn't matter, it's your painting. Much better to leave it when you're painting like this than to actually overwork. Definitely. Got a couple of reds going on there. I think one's a cad-free red plain and the other one is cad-free scarlet. The cad-free scarlet is a very, very good colour for poppies. Nice and bright. and quite realistic. It's just started to rain here. I don't know if you can hear it pattering on the window. Great. There's a fold here, so I've just left that little bit that's folded back, and I'll paint that separately in a minute. But they have little kind of frilly edges and little crevices that I'm now starting to think about putting in. Worked all right on that one. Right, I'm actually going to paint this one. I know it's next door to two very wet petals, but I'm going to let this little flower bleed away a little bit. Which really is the technique I wanted to have a little go at this week. Just allowing part of the flower to blend away in your picture. I'm trying to avoid the middle there. Right, so I'm going to not necessarily put clean water on there. I'm going to, I think, use a nice warm yellow, because I want to keep a nice warm painting. Everything's going to be lovely and warm and sunny and bright, unlike the weather outside today. So I've gone over my little buds there, which I can paint on the top of, because I'll keep them just pale. If your petals that you're allowing to blend have dried up a little bit too much, you can always just drop a little bit more of your poppy colour, or whatever colour you're using, at the edge, and then just let it float away. You won't see what's happened there properly until it's dry. And I'm keeping the emphasis here and letting this side go a little bit more. And if you wanted to, you could always put another little colour in as well to make. This is blue, so whether my yellow is going to turn green or grey, I don't know, but it'll just add interest. I wasn't going to do that, I've just thought of it. Let's see what happens. Maybe a little bit of that could just blend away as well. Just pop a little bit of warmth in there too. And when it dries, it should look quite nice. So now I'm going to get more defined this side of that flower. I'm sure that piece of music comes on every week. Nice. That's the little outside petal that always sits at the back, surrounding the centre petals. Oh, I'd forgotten about that fold back, that's still there. So I've got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to stop any minute now and just let bits dry and paint a little bit more so that you can see it finished. That soon went. Right, so this is going to be a very open one, isn't it? And here we go again with the yellow background. Nice warm yellow. Any yellow would do, just so long as it's a nice warm one, just to keep that lovely warmth going in your picture. Right, okay, so I'll have to stop and then come back in a minute. Okay, I've finished painting that poppy and painted in the shape of this one. That was a complicated shape. But I just want to go back in a little bit now, I think, and just pop a few more little bits of shadow in the crevices. Not too much detail, but just enough to give it its character and a bit more shape to some of these petals by popping in shadowy shapes. But dropping the water back on has already created a sort of crinkly effect, which I was hoping for, which you don't see until it's dry, which I hope you can see now. But a little bit of bright shadow going on the top here now before I pop the stamens in might just make it look a little bit more realistic. But it is a loose painting, so I'm not going to get all carried away with that detail too much. A bit more shadow just there, perhaps, to keep the eye in this focal area here. So it's starting to get a bit of greenery around as well. Move it back on, which always helps. So just a few more little crinkly areas within the petals, just at the edges, I think, which is where you just see little folds and things, and showing up the character of the actual flower. But still holding my brush very loosely and just not being too fussy about it. Just need to be brought up a little bit there. And again, when all of those little areas dry, it will show up better and look better. So more than ever with this flower, I think, allow it to dry before making too many judgments and trying to fix it up too much while it's still wet. So it'll fold back here. So that just gives a little bit more shape to that petal there, and it's really actually quite dark here. My poppies are still standing up. Just soften that away. So not much more to do. Just popping these shadows in. I quite like that crinkly effect that seems to have happened there. I'm not going to touch that too much more. I've got another bud here. That little seed head is disappearing into my washed away area, which is what I wanted. And that one's partly showing because of it again. but this one I can see quite clearly here. I'm not going to paint all the little whiskers in, but I'm just sort of dotting some colour back on the top of those, because that might just indicate that it's slightly textured and not very smooth because of all the little whiskers. But I mean, I do know some people who will sit and paint every whisker in, and that's fine, but I haven't got the time or the inclination to do that today. But there's some petals showing within this bud in here, so I'll just pop that little spot of red in there, and then I think I'll just pop a bit more background on before popping on the centres. So just not worrying too much whether I go over the top of my poppy petals. It's just going to add a bit of sunlight if I do, and if it's completely dry it wouldn't move it anyway. It's not probably quite dry, but it's all right. So just play around with your painting in using this technique if you haven't really done very much of this before, and just allow things to happen and then let it dry. Maybe don't expect too much, you know, if it's the first time, but I think if you just leave watercolour be, to a very large extent, it's going to do nice things for you. I think a little bit more blue, and I've been using the ultramarine blue to create a sort of greeny grey through my picture here on top of the yellow, to kind of make a sort of greeny grey, indicating, you know, whatever might be going on around. And then let that dry, because you're not going to see what's there until you do. Right, okay. So I'm going to dry that background off, and then I can put the centres in. Shouldn't use the hairdryer really. It would have been better to have allowed it to dry naturally, but you can. So it's got quite a pale centre here before the stamens go on. I'm sitting up a bit. Might have been nice to have put a little bit of raw sienna underneath first, but I can put it on afterwards when it's dry, because it has got a sort of yellowy, greeny centre there. Right, so now I need stamens, and I've mixed together some Payne's grey and some violet, or any purple would do, just to make it a slightly better colour than just Payne's grey. Just warmed it a little bit, and then with the tip of your brush just pop in the stamens, and that's when the poppy, I think, comes to life a bit better. Got some contrast now, and a focal area within each flower. So so it's easier to look at. Don't be fussy with it. Just pop them in and letting them spread out a little bit. That shouldn't have been there, should it? Because that's in front of it. Never mind. I'll just change that up. Right. And then if you want to spread those a little bit and make them look a little bit more natural, a little bit looser, just touch water on the top. You can always go back and put a little bit more depth in them later. So then you can maybe get your sword brush out and indicate some leaf, or you can leave it like that, either way. But it obviously got some leaves at the bottom here, and I'm not going to be too precise about them, but it'll actually add a little bit more green to the thing, which is obviously going to look better. So I'm just going to, with my sword brush, indicate some leaf without getting too detailed about this shape, just something like this. All sorts of bits and pieces sitting at the bottom where the poppies grow. And they do actually have more leaf at the bottom than anywhere else. They don't really have too many leaves higher up towards the actual poppy head. So most of the leaf will be down here. So that just kind of finishes it off, perhaps. Optional extra. And some grasses. But it's giving some strength as well at the bottom here. And I'm having a little bit of fun with my sword brush. Don't be afraid to go over the top of your poppies so that they're actually sitting maybe a bit behind some of this greenery. Twist and turn the brush around and it'll make shapes for you without very much effort. So that's loose. Drop some water back on, mix it up a little bit. Maybe another colour in there. So now my poppies are growing outside. I like the bit there where the water just moved the paint around and made its own shapes. That's loose. So don't be afraid to try. Just let things happen. Watercolour will very rarely let you down if you let it be sometimes and just create shapes for you. Right, so that's all I'm going to do. So, my poppies for today. Hope you can see it all okay. Take your time over it. I've had to hurry this a bit, but you know, I could touch it up if I wanted to now and just finish it off a bit, but I don't know that I will. But take your time and allow areas to dry and decide what it needs. Poppies are not easy, but the end result can look really good and nice and bright and cheerful if you know, follow the rules a bit. Putting a little bit more of the stronger stamens in over the top here while that's still slightly damp but not completely dry. It looks better. So there's always a little bit of touching up to do, I think. For years I've tried to do poppies justice. I'm not sure if I ever have, but I keep trying. And next week I'm going to paint similarly, and maybe I shall be painting a fuchsia. I have quite a few fuchsias in the garden. I was looking at them this morning and they were asking for me to paint them. So I think next week it will be a similar sort of thing, but painting a fuchsia. Have a good week and I hope you find some poppies. Take care. Bye-bye.